for the video. Is that possible?
You're fine.
What's that?
You're fine.
Oh, okay.
Good camera.
Either way, I guess.
We got a good camera.
Great. Light sensitive camera. Very good. I just didn't want to fall asleep up here. It's so relaxed now. I remember when I was, thank you, driving, my wife and our youngest son was about 5 or 6 years old, sitting in the back seat, and we were having, Denise and I were having one of these theological conversations, and I don't remember exactly what Denise and I were saying, but this little boy in the back seat piped up and said, well, guys, God is right here in my heart. And Denise and I looked at each other and we said, you know, I don't think we've ever really said that. And we asked him about it. So where did that come from? He said, I just feel it. And we looked at each other with envy. Because what this little 5-year-old boy was doing was not professing a belief, which so many of us cling to when we don't have the direct experience, yes? And he was speaking from a knowing place. This was a real-time revelation, recognition, realization, which is what we are all here to have. Course in Miracles says that this journey we're on has no distance. It's merely a recognition. That's what enlightenment is, yeah? So for these last several weeks, I've been talking about the Unitive way, based loosely on the book The Wisdom Jesus by Cynthia Bourgeault. And I got interested in her work at a time in my life when I was feeling like my sermons and my spiritual understanding was becoming stale. I began to hear myself more like a replay, a recording, a broken record that is sort of stuck in the same groove with the same words, but it didn't have a fresh meaning to me. It didn't feel alive. It felt like doctrine. It felt like dogma. It felt like, memorized utterances from others. And I was really feeling bereft from this feeling of being connected with the Spirit. And I didn't want to stand up in front of people and not feel something. And I realized that I had allowed myself to rely upon my memory of the truth, to subjugate the necessary inward journey to touch the knowing in my own heart. I don't know if this resonates with any of you, but if it does, then I hope that you will understand that the way I teach now is more, not as formulaic, I guess you might say, as it used to be. Because I had some good sermons, I polished up some words, you know what I'm saying? And I had the words, and I could articulate these ideas and these truths and these teachings in a way that, had a certain eloquence. But, you can't fool your own heart. You might be able to fool some of the people some of the time. But I'm sure that the people who were most sensitive to words that were not connected to the truth of the one who was uttering them were feeling less than inspired. So when I was getting ready to leave ministry, which was back in 2019, I knew that my work was going to have to be, if I was going to go back into ministry, it was going to have to be to go back into the well of my own deepening and my deepening and the deepening of my knowing and my understanding. And you know, there's a little axiom that's bantered about for spiritual teachers and ministers that says if you want them to give you living water, you need to let them spend time at the well. And of course that's true for every one of us. That if we're wanting to bring forth this living waters, this living word of truth, then we have to go to the source of that. Not to the memory of it. Not to the well-worn phrases, as Jesus sort of chided the Pharisees of the time who would stand out on the street corners and utter these beautiful prayers. They were, very much connected with the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law was missing. They hadn't touched the hem of the garment of their own truth. And they were only uttering these words that they thought would make them, sanctimonious and complicit with the requirements of their religion. But the requirements of spiritual awakening cannot rely upon history or the past. The requirements of spiritual awakening is a real-time, present moment connection with the truth of our being. And that's why this is about going inside. And I've been saying in every talk that I've given that we need to go into the heart. We must go into the heart. Because if we're not in the heart, then typically, where are we? We're in our heads. And our heads are wonderful servants of the truth, but they can also deprive us of the journey of connecting to the truth that can only be experienced by this part of us that experiences and perceives wholeness. Because the mind is very good at differentiating and perceiving through differentiation. There's the subject and then there's the object. As when I perceive, there's me, the subject, and then whatever I'm looking at is the object. And that's dualistic. And what we say is the truth is what? It's oneness. There is no dualism in the truth. There is a seamless interconnection between all things in the universe. And we can't perceive that with a mind that is dualistic and binary, which separates things. You can't expect your mind to ever get this stuff. And if you do get it, you'll only get it by memorization and forcing yourself to believe. But that's devoid of the knowing, of the experience of unity and oneness. And isn't that really where the juice is, where the joy is, where the peace is? Those fruits of the Spirit that we're wanting will never be realized by a mind that can't perceive oneness. But the heart doesn't have to be convinced of oneness because it knows nothing other than oneness. So we go to that in us which already knows the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we allow it to inform us and allow that truth to be known in us and as us and through us. And then it is a walking, talking reality for us. And it colors our world. When I remember first being exposed to religion and hearing about this master teacher, Jesus, and that he was this, man who, or this God who became man in the traditional doctrine. And he came into this earth with this incredible capacity for unconditional love. And I thought, and he's supposed to be our way shower, right? And he's supposed to be our moral authority, according to the old religion, is that we're supposed to, what would Jesus do? You'd be like Jesus. And when I would hear these things, that he would love people who had persecuted him, and he would love his enemies. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. But I had no way of understanding how that could even be possible. It seemed like an impossible ambition to try to love in that way. Because I was looking through, at the way most of us do, through my mind. The mind has no capacity to see another person as part of you. It will see your distinctions and your differences, but it will not entertain a notion of oneness. So that's why so often, when I was growing up and I thought, this is absurd. I said, I'm going to these church services and I'm encountering people who call themselves Christians, and yet they are just gossipy and they're judging, and I judge, and I see this is ridiculous. If this is what this is all about, is like falling so far short of the ideal of what's supposed to be the ideal way of living, to be, a truly sacred human being, then it's all a sham. It's filled with hypocrisy. Has anyone had that experience? I saw so much hypocrisy. And I knew that I was a hypocrite if I was professing to be a loving Christian, because I judged. But those days, I wasn't connected with my heart. I had no other way of conceiving how these teachings could be true through the lens of my mind, because it is designed to see things in separate and distinct and differentiation and diversity and multiplicity. That is the purpose of the mind, and it serves us well in this world, yes? But can you see how it can confound our intention to experience unity and oneness and unconditional love and peace that passes human understanding? So when you hear me, every time we go into a meditation, I'm directing our attention into our heart, because that is the only way that we are going to be able to realize our divine nature, and let alone be able to express it. And before we can express our divine nature, love and joy and peace and wholeness, we have to know love and peace and joy and wholeness in our own hearts. So it is, as you have heard a million times, it is an inside-out journey that we are on. And it will frustrate the kapok out of us if we try to make our world perfect, so that then we can experience happiness and peace. Because the world is only an effect, yes? A Course in Miracles says, seek not to change the world, but change your mind about the world, and then the world will change automatically. So the way I hear that is that changing your mind is really about changing your heart. Not changing your heart, but changing your mind to access its truth from your heart, where it will find and experience and know this essential unity and this oneness. So when Jesus came on the scene and he started trying to express this truth in the way of the parables were very much like Zen koans. They weren't meant to appease people. They were meant to shock them, because all of the parables had these ridiculously illogical conclusions. And that kind of shock is necessary for us to shift our perceptions from our head, where it makes no sense at all, and for us to seek a deeper knowing and a deeper wisdom, which moves us necessarily out of our head and into the part of us that can know how oneness could be possible, how unconditional love is an existing reality. And so when he told that story of the prodigal son, probably his most famous parable of all, it was so ridiculous to tell a story of a son, particularly in that culture, who would come to his father and say, "Hey, Dad, give me half of my inheritance," before his father was even dead. And then to take that and then go off and live it and spend it in riotous living, which I guess would be sex, drugs, and rock and roll in today's terms, and to blow it and then just be at his worst. And then he goes, "Oh, I guess I was better off at home." And he comes back, and the people that are listening to this story, can you imagine, they're just waiting for Jesus to talk about how outraged the father would be that his son would have this unmitigated gall to take half of his inheritance before he had even died and go off and blow it all and then want to come home. They were ready for Jesus to say, and the father was angry and said, "I disown you, and I know I don't see you anymore, and as far as I'm concerned, you don't exist." But that's not what Jesus said, was it? He said when the boy started to come back, and he was still far off, but he had already turned towards home, the father's reaction is that he ran to him. And he had told this older brother and the staff to create a party. This was a celebration. And that's what the heart can appreciate. And the heart can understand. Because it never judges. So it doesn't have to forgive. It embraces because it sees the essential oneness and connection with all of life. You know, there's an expression that I think it's in A Course in Miracles. It says, God doesn't forgive because God has never judged. And we don't have any capacity for that if we're stuck in our head. Because that part of us is transactional. It's, if you love me, I love you back. There has to be something coming to me first before I give you. And Jesus talks about when you, as you give, you will receive. And it's not a consequence of your giving that you receive. It's as you give, you receive, because as you give, you are expressing your true nature. And when you're expressing your true nature, you experience the love that you were giving. I don't know anything about love unless I'm giving it. If I'm sitting back feeling bereft of love and waiting for someone to love me, waiting for my wife to love me and to be nice to me, and all those sort of expectations that come from a dualistic binary mind, then I'm bereft of this feeling of truth and wholeness and love, because I'm expecting it to be an outer activity instead of an inner knowing. Does that make sense? And of course, we come by it honestly, and it's not for us to judge ourselves because we do those things, but it's for us to realize that those are dead ends. For me to realize that if I am going to experience the depth of love that I feel that I'm entitled to, that I want, that I intuit is actually a reality, then I can't expect it to come from outside of myself. I have to find it where it already exists and where it is already a part of me. Not just a part of me, but actually I am an expression of it. So that's what is so important about understanding Jesus' teachings as non-dual wisdom teachings that point us to this depth. They at first shock us, they first make us think like, oh, that's not even possible to love my enemy. Think about people in your life that you have named enemy in the past, or maybe even currently. And to think about loving them. If you're up here and you're making a laundry list of all the things they did, or that one terrible thing that they did, then you have a wall between you and love. The Course in Miracles says, exempt no one from your love, or you'll be hiding a dark place in you where the Spirit is not welcome. And if we try to do that with our mind, it won't work. We will have to go into that spiritual bypass. You know what a spiritual bypass is? Spiritual bypass is when you know you should forgive somebody, and so you just sort of give lip service to it. Oh, I forgive her. I forgave him already. And yet, in your heart of hearts, you don't experience the oneness of the connection with that person, or see the innocence of that person, if you're just giving lip service to the notion of forgiveness. You have to get into your heart. And I've done some forgiveness work in my life, and I've done both versions of them. And I'm here to tell you that the one where you try to do the bypass, it's got a very short shelf life. And soon you're back again with anger and resentment and judging of that person. But if your prayer and your prayer life is about going into your heart of hearts and asking to see the inseparable connection that you have with that person, and not their person in terms of their physical person or their circumstances, but the lifeline of truth in which you are one with that person, then shift can happen. That's when grace comes. That's when love that can melt the resentments can happen. And that's what Jesus was trying to get us to do. As he said, my kingdom is not of this world. And they were trying to get him to take the stand as someone who would reconcile and correct the wrongs that were happening in the society. And the Roman oppression of the people. And he said, it's not about changing things out here. You can do that, but if you don't do that from a place of the truth, then you're only just, rearranging deck chairs. Ultimately your efforts will not pay off, and you'll be back again, seeking for a different outcome, a different scenario, a different person, a different set of circumstances, because you become dependent on life being a certain way for you to be okay. So, a lot of people say, wow, your sermons are really deep, Well, it's because I've spent enough time in the shallow waters and nearly drowned in them. But in the deep waters, I can breathe underwater. You know what I mean? Jesus was out fishing with the disciples. You remember that one time, and they weren't catching any fish, and I don't know what it was about Jesus, but fishing always got better when he showed up. And they're out, and he goes, well, let's go out here. And so he goes out with some of his disciples, and they've been fishing a particular way, and he said, throw the nets on the right side of the boat. Well, you could take that metaphorically, like the right side, like he knew the right place where the fish were. But it says, into the deep waters. Throw the nets into the deep waters. And they bring up a large catch of fish. Now, you can think, oh, Jesus, I'm going to go out fishing and see if I can catch more. But Jesus was always speaking metaphorically. And the invitation is that if you're not getting what you want, if you're not feeling fulfilled, satisfied in your life, then it's because you're fishing in the shallow waters of appearances. You're judging by appearances. You're trying to extract the joy of life from situations and circumstances and people which are constantly shifting and changing, and you're not going to the source which contains what you really, really want. If you're looking for love, you've got to look where love is, not where love isn't. You can't rely upon other people to take the place of God in your life. You can't rely upon circumstances to be the embodiment of the blessings that you're looking for in life. You have to go into this heart of hearts, into that still secret place of the Most High. And those people who followed that had these revelations. You know, the disciples who were really deniers of Jesus' teachings and really didn't get it. After he was crucified and after the resurrection, they began to have these experiences because they were no longer looking at Jesus as a man who was going to change and make this heaven on earth, and realize that he was where he was pointing them, was pointing them to their own inner sanctuary, asking them to go there and look there. You know, go into the closet and close the door, and the God that hears in secret will bless you, will reveal to you this truth. And this revelation of truth will be the answer to all of your prayers, regardless of what they are. And then knowing that you are already infilled and you already are sourced by this love and this peace, then you can take that and shift your behavior. And how would it be if you knew that love is what you are and peace is already established and that you're coming from a place of feeling no separation? How does that affect your relationship? How does that affect your work? How does that affect your purpose? What demands do you need to put on life or on the government or on anything outside of yourself? If we want to transform and heal the world, we have to first heal and transform our consciousness. This is what we teach in Unity, folks. But the depth of it is sometimes overlooked. We think, I'll just use some affirmations. And affirmations are great because they do speak the truth. But if they're only at the level of the auditory vocalization, and they don't activate in us a knowing in our own hearts that they are true, then they're just like those vain repetitions that Jesus was so critical of for the Pharisees who stood and professed these wonderful prayers. But they didn't know this truth. And Nicodemus, you must be born from above. You must be born again. In other words, you must, go beyond this mental superiority that you have, where you think that you can through the machinations of your desires and your preferences, you can make the world what you want. You have to find this source of infinite love and peace and abundance within you. And if you find that, then you will become a fully realized child of God. And that's what we're here for. Is any of this ring true? So sort of abandoned my talk for today because I felt like I was beginning to lose my way. And I thought, oh, I could do part 4, this sort of sequence of I did that, and then I did that, and then I said that, and now I'm going to say this. But I think it's important that if we're going to go on a journey together, that we stop every once in a while on the way and remember why we're going, and why we're going there, and what is this about? Are we just going to, give lip service to the idea of spirituality, and that we show up and we sit and do our prayers and we read our daily word, and are we going to just do it in a mechanized way, or are we going to remember that the words that we speak, we don't speak them to make them true. We speak them because they are true. Think about it. What would it take for you to utter the words, there is only one power and one presence in the universe, God the good, omnipotent, and to be sensitive to how the mind is like, yeah, really, one presence, one power. What about that? What about this? What about the stuff in the world? In other words, if we don't take these teachings that we can easily profess and walk them back to the source where we know that it's true, then those words have no power in our world. They will only have power for the people who hear them and go, I know that to be true. And that those words then amplify the nuanced and the subtle awareness of the truth of their being. And that's what this work is about expanding and growing and making more real the essence of us, our true nature, and bringing that true nature into this world, into our relationships, into our work, so that we can transform the world from our own transformed consciousness. Isn't that really the power of these teachings? And I wanted to share that with you today because I know for myself that I can get lazy, especially because I'm so practiced in these teachings. You've been doing it for a long time. You can just utter all these great words. But I notice that when I'm really seeking to know these truths in the moment, I slow down. You can probably hear me slowing down sometimes. It's because I'm looking for the authentic voice, the knowing voice, not just the words that have become so easily to recall and to repeat. Yes? Amen? Amen. 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 Well, let's go within, shall we? I just thought of that. It would be a good idea. Just invite you to take a deep breath with me and exhale the mental noise. Then another breath, drawing in this pure life-giving spirit that we draw in every time we intend to open our hearts. And let go of needing to know. This is an opportunity for you to do the dance of spiritual realization, which is a letting go and a letting in. So first we begin by letting go of anything that we might be attached to right now. Situations in our life, of course we have our preferences. That's normal from the human experience. But they don't serve us. if we're trying to get into the truth and into our heart of hearts. See, God doesn't have is not worried about your life. Is not engaged and confounded by the problems that you have, that I have. So we're wanting to get into the consciousness of all is well. So if we have an attachment, if we're aware right now of some situation where we're wanting it to be a certain way, and just let that go. Could you just let that go? First, let go that you even know what would be best, because you don't. You don't certainly know the implications of how things could turn out that could first be a blessing and then be a curse. So what if we just let go of needing life to be a particular way? What if we can really surrender to the will of the One? If for no other reason, then it will move us into this kingdom of God within. Or our preferences for the way life should be will only be barriers to the spiritual understanding that we're seeking. Simply said, let go and let God. If we can't let go, then God is not free to be realized in our own hearts. The truth, the whole truth, is all we're ever seeking. And in that truth, all of our needs are abundantly met. Because that which is all-encompassing has nothing missing or lacking. If love is what you are, then there is no room or space in the infinity and the eternity of love for anything unlike love. That's how we transform from inside out. So for this moment, allow yourself to let in all the love. Let it bubble up from your heart of hearts. This is the part of you that we say was made in the image and likeness of Spirit. Love itself gave birth to you. And you are its offspring, yet inseparable from your Father, Mother, God. You are love's expression. Peace is your true nature. Not peace under some conditions and not others, but peace that Jesus said would be beyond human understanding, but within the realm of understanding when you know yourself as you truly are. This is a pervading, illimitable peace that cannot be disrupted or even delayed. It's here, it's now, in its fullness. And that even though life will challenge us, and there will be trials and tribulations, there is an overcoming power. And it is this realization. So joy can bubble up even in the midst of difficulty. Not joy in response to life, but joy that is a transcendent energy of being that is not limited or contained by what happens. This is who we've come here to be. This is who we truly are. Let us sit quietly now in the silence of our own hearts and allow this to grow in us and glow in us and know ourselves as it is. And from this knowing place, we come back to this time and space as the I am that I am, that we are. That sends us to this now moment, to be the voice and to be the heart and to be the hands that makes heaven known on earth. And we give thanks for these powerful teachings that can change us for good if we have the willingness and the letting go of the willfulness, so that the will of the one who wants only for us to experience our oneness with its beauty and its love and its joy and its peace, this we can surrender to in every moment of experience. How well we have been provided for.